Thank you, Jack, and thank you all for coming out on a snowy night. And I would like to thank Jim Sopranos also for making my trip here possible. I'm actually in the archives during the day. And then when Jack said, would you lecture on your book at night? I'm like, sure, why not? So, but I have to admit, I probably have not addressed an audience where so many people have already read the book, right? So how many have at least started it? How many finished it? How many just think we should just chat about it? All right, well, I had a lot of fun writing this book. I have to tell you, though, it was not my idea to write it. It was Rob Tampio of Princeton University Press. He took me out to dinner. That's the best way to get me to write a book, take me to dinner. And he said, I'd like you to write a book about the collapse. And I said, well, anybody could do it. I mean, there's numerous people in this audience could be writing this book. And I said, and it's been done before. In fact, you guys published a book yourselves about 20 years ago. He said, yeah, but there's been a lot of advances, right? And I said, sure. And he said, well, I'd like you to do it. And I said, I'll do it on one condition. Let me write about what collapsed as well as how it collapsed. Because to me, the late Bronze Age, I think, is the most fascinating period in the history of the world. If I could live any time, I would choose the late Bronze Age. I'd probably be dead within 24 hours, but I think it'd be a lot of fun to live back then. So he agreed. He said, okay, look, as long as you give me part of what I want. So the beginning and the ending of the book are about the collapse. And the middle part is about the 15th, 14th, 13th, 12th centuries, my favorite time of the world. And I had a lot of fun writing it. But then he said, in return, though, if I let you write about what you want, you have to let me do a book trailer. And I said, what's a book trailer? And he says, you know, like a movie trailer? I said, yeah, sure. I've never heard of one for a book, though. He says, oh, it's all the new rage. Like, really? I've never seen one. So he sent me a link, and I clicked on it. And this poor guy at some campus holding his book saying, hi, I've written a book. Please buy it. And I called Rob up, and I said, I will not do that. Even I have my limits. And he said, no, I want to do something completely over the top. And so I actually engaged one of my ex-students who runs a film studio, Jesse Krinsky. And so we made this completely over-the-top trailer of about 53 seconds long. I don't know if it affected the sales at all, but it was a lot of fun to make. So anyway, we'll see. But if you want, I've got it. Do you want to see it? Yeah? Okay, let's see if I can get the thing working. Bear with me, it's totally over the top, I admit this, but let me see if I can get it working. We'll see if the sound works. No idea if that helped the book sales or not, but it was fun to make. And they now, he just signed a guy to a book contract, and the guy said, I want a book trailer. Okay, fine. All right. Okay, so serious now. All right, what I want to do is talk about the collapse that happened about 1200 BC. Familiar to many of you? It's a collapse that I think the world has never seen until, say, the collapse of the Roman Empire. And even that may pale in comparison here. So let me show you tonight what I mean by that. And I'm fully aware that I'm not the first one talking about collapse, right? That's probably Edward Gibbon with the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. And then Joseph Tainter, the collapse of complex societies back in about 1988. And then I imagine how many of you have read Jared Diamond's book, The Collapse, right? So the one difference is that those authors were all talking about one society. And what I'm talking about is multiple societies that all went down at once. So they're talking about the Romans, they're talking about the Maya, the Indus Valley, but we're talking about 8 civilizations that all went down at once. And it's not just that they were 8 different societies or civilizations, but they were intertwined, they were interwoven, they were globalized, if you want to call it that. Now, globalization back then is a little bit different from today. It's a smaller world for one thing, but if you take a look at something like a small world network diagram, this is something my wife works on, Diane Cline, and so she made this diagram for me, and you can see that there are links between most every one of these civilizations. If you're familiar with Kevin Bacon, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Same thing back then. If you didn't know somebody, you knew somebody who knew them, and so everyone is connected back then. Now, the Late Bronze Age and us today are 2 of about the only instances I can think of where people are that interlinked, that interwoven, that globalized. So I actually think that there's more comparison to them back then than you might suspect. Now, we're talking about period from about 1700 to 1200 BC, Late Bronze Age. Here's some of the people that are living back then, and I call them the G8, fudging a bit. And actually, if you count them up, you've got the Aegean, Egyptians, Hittites, Canaanites, Cypriots, Mitanni, Assyrians, Babylonians. There are 8 there, but I'm fudging because the Aegeans got both Minoans and Mycenaeans. But G9 just didn't have the same ring. But they are all interconnected, and then when they collapse, pretty much everything goes down. Now, a lot of people say, before I read this, I didn't think I knew anybody back then, but in an audience like this, I don't have to tell you that this period has everybody. Hatshepsut, King Tut, Ramses II, Ramses III, my boy Amenhotep III, Akhenaten. This is that period. And this is the time with the Battle of Kadesh and the Trojan War, if it took place, and the Exodus, if it took place. And yes, we do have arguments about that at home and everywhere else. So this is a period that actually more people are familiar with than realize. And they go, oh, I didn't know that's when they lived. So this is a period that when it does collapse and everything goes down, interlinked, almost like dominoes, as I want to show you. And when it does collapse, the world loses an amazing amount of knowledge, and we get into the world's first dark ages. So I do think that it's a collapse that the world hadn't seen and will not see again until the Roman Empire collapses. So the big question is, of course, what caused it? And this is still a mystery today. I will tell you right now, spoiler alert, I don't know what caused it. I think I have some ideas about it, but there is no real smoking gun, quite literally, out there. But let me present to you some of the possibilities and then see what you think. So the original hypothesis is that the Sea Peoples did this, those wacky people coming running through the Mediterranean twice in 1207 and 1177. I suppose better would be to say the 5th year of Merneptah and the 8th year of Ramses III, because you Egyptologists keep changing the numbers on me, right? In fact, when the book came out, I got an email from a senior friend of mine in New York City who simply wrote, he said, the title should have been 1186. I sent him back a 2-word email. No, it's not what you think. I said, it was. And indeed, back when I started writing the book in about 2008, the contract says 1186 BC. By the time I finished it, I said that we got to change it. It's going to 1177. So somewhere in there. But the Sea Peoples come through the region twice. And we know the story from Medinet Habu, which is a place very familiar to the OI here. When the Medinet Habu was excavated and they found the wall reliefs, Gaston Maspero, one of the earliest French Egyptologists, already blamed the whole collapse of the Late Bronze Age on the Sea Peoples, and he had already formulated this by like the mid-1800s, and so it was kind of set in stone, as it were, by about 1901. this is well before any of the sites that they were supposed to have destroyed had actually been excavated. So after that, every time somebody found a site and it was destroyed, they said, oh, it's got to be the Sea Peoples. But this is kind of backwards, I think you will agree. But we have the full story. Ramses III tells us about this. It's the text that goes with the pictures. So I'm not going to read you the whole thing, but give you an idea. He says, the foreign countries made a conspiracy in their islands. All at once the lands were removed and scattered in the fray. No land could stand before them, their arms. And then he names the places they overran, and we know where they are, right? From Hatay, that is Turkey, Kode and Carchemish, Arzawa on the western coast of Turkey, Alatia, namely Cyprus. All of them were cut off at that time. A camp was set up in Amur, that is northern Syria. They desolated its people. Its land was like that which has never come into being. And then he ends up naming them. He says their confederation was the Peleset, the Tejeker, the Shekelesh, the Denyen, and the Weshes, lands united. And he beats them. And he actually tells us in the Papyrus Harris, written about year 12 or so, says, I overthrew those who invaded them from their lands. I slew the Denyen, who were in their isles. The Tejeker and the Peleset were made ashes. Shardana and the Weshes of the sea, they were made as those that exist not. Right now, he's calling them the people from the sea, the people from the islands, but and the people from the north. But if you go north, pretty much everybody is from over on that region. So they didn't actually call them the sea peoples. That's us calling them that. But if you want to figure out how to dress like one, it's quite easy because they've got all the pictures right there. In fact, for next Halloween, you could go as a sea person if you want. It's actually a very cheap costume. When I was in graduate school, the two people the year behind me showed up at the Halloween party with lots of letter C's all over, probably 100 of them. And I said, what are you? They said, we're sea peoples. It can be a very cheap costume. But Ramses, he tells us their names, but he doesn't tell us where they're from. So we've been playing, linguistic guessing games. So the Shardana, name me a place in the Mediterranean that's got the same type of consonants. Sardinia, right? So maybe they're from there. The Shekelesh, again, place with consonants. Maybe Sicily. The Tejeker, who knows? Maybe the Cycles or the Troad. Denyen, people like to say these are Homer's Danaans, namely the Mycenaeans. The Weshesh, maybe from Troy, who knows? It's only the Peleset that we think we know. These are the Philistines, and in fact, Champollion had already made that assignation way back when. And the Bible actually says the Philistines come from Crete, so if you want it to work that way, you can. But there's a problem because there's not a single site that we can point to where we say these people came from. And it's quite possible that they went to Sardinia or Sicily after they're defeated. We don't know if they're coming west to east or east to west, so it is still all quite a great mystery. We do have Philistine settlements, of course, from the region of Canaan, Israel, Lebanon, Syria. Lots of work going on right here, and I think Aaron Meir lectured here on the Philistines not so long ago. The one thing to remember, though, is with the reliefs at Medinet Habu, they're not just showing Vikings coming through, they're showing a migration, right? It's not just single warriors, but you've got women and children and ox carts, and so this is a whole migration of people. And so it used to be that people said, and not even used to be, people still say it now, that there was a drought, it led to famine, that led to movement of sea peoples, that led to havoc and cutting of the trade routes, and that led to the collapse. And indeed, maybe that is what happened, but I would say that's probably too simple and too simplistic. Right? Everything is a lot messier than it should be. So if that's too simple, I would ask what really happened, and that's what I'm going to present to you tonight. We're not going to go through the whole book. That would take 3 or 4 hours, though I'm happy to do it if you want to. But let me just present to you some of the major hypotheses for what caused the collapse, and then see if we can bring it all together. But I would start out by saying that this is a globalized society, as far as I can tell, and you've got everybody happily linked with everybody else. And in part, what serves as a very good example is bronze itself. I mean, we're in the Bronze Age, 3000 to 1000 BC, but specifically we're in the late Bronze Age, actually almost the middle Bronze Age as well. And of course, bronze, you make it tin plus copper. If you're not so smart, you'd use arsenic instead of tin, but you're not going to live very long. But copper is no